Good morning and welcome back to another edition of Research Fantasy Presents our NFL running back discussion for week 1 of the NFL season. I don't know what better title to give it than that. Like we did yesterday with the quarterbacks, we want to look at the running backs, not necessarily list out our favorite plays. After all, we've got a premium package we're trying to push here, folks. We'll still have plenty of discussion, but head over to researchfantasy.com to our NFL premium package. We will be offering that free week 1. We'll have a variety of looks into the games, some of our favorite cash game tournament value plays. We'll have some stuff for season-long players as well. So I think it'll be worth a look. Really excited about that. Let's break things down kind of in pricing tiers. I'm using DraftKings for the pricing this week. And we will look at what I will kind of call Tier 1, which is over 8K. Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson, LeSean McCoy, Ezekiel Elliott. Despite being the highest priced player on the slate, I fully expect Le'Veon Bell to carry some of the highest ownership. He's going against a Browns defense that was not able to stop the run at all last year, even though he's missed all of training camp and is really going to have about 5 days of practice prior to the start of this season. He's a very likely player to hit 25 plus fantasy points. The offense, with Ben struggling so much on the road, is likely to flow through him, which is always a positive. So that's where we're at with Bell. Johnson does not face a great matchup, but it does not matter. These guys in this tier are basically all matchup proof. He'll see less ownership, so that's an angle. I think he's going to be more heavily involved in the Arizona passing game this year after they decided not to move Andre Ellington to the slot. I think that only helps David Johnson. We saw Ezekiel Elliott is going to play week 1 before serving his suspension, or maybe not, who knows. Not a good matchup for him, but I'm very happy that he's playing because ultimately I think all of these things help drag down the ownership of LeSean McCoy, who I see being the winner here. The matchup is irrelevant. This Jets team is nowhere near the team it was offensively or defensively last year. The offense is going to flow through LeSean McCoy like it hasn't in years prior. He makes a very, very, very appealing option this week. Great pivot. Next up, let's look at the 6K and above. We've got DeMarco Murray, Devonta Freeman, Jay Ajayi, Jordan Howard, Darren McFadden, and Todd Gurley. We can throw McFadden out because he's not going to have a role in this game now. So that's going to move some lineups around because people know the Dallas rushing attack is one to go after. And I don't think anyone's going to give the Giants enough credit on defense. Jay Ajayi might also be ruled out because there's a genuine concern that this game might not be played. I think the NFL is doing everything they can logistically to make things work out because you really can't have teams playing for 16 weeks straight, although some kind of do during the playoffs, depending on where their bye week fell earlier. This is a range where, for the most part, I think I like guys like Murray, Freeman. I like Todd Gurley. I expect Gurley to carry extremely high ownership due to the fact that the Colts are an absolutely awful defense. Scott Tolzien starting. His ownership will be up there. Jordan Howard should see volume, but I just can't do it. I'm very afraid of him. Freeman and Murray are guys that will go probably a little bit under-owned this week because you'll be looking to spend up or spend down a little bit. With Gurley at that attractive price point, I could certainly see there being a case for some ownership percentages for Murray and Freeman being left on the table. I think Murray's my favorite out of them. He's going to get early down work. He's probably going to get late down work, and I know there's some genuine concern that Derrick Henry will steal some carries, but I don't think that's going to be as prevalent as in week 1 as maybe week 8. The next tier of players we've got here, as my screen goes back, because Macs are great with that. You can't touch them if you touch them a little too tough, they kind of start to move around. Anyway, we've got a pretty big chunk here. Ty Montgomery, Leonard Fournette, Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry, Tevin Coleman, Christian McCaffrey, Isaiah Crowell, Marshawn Lynch, Danny Woodhead, Lamar Miller, Eddie Lacy, Jonathan Stewart. So this is kind of a range that's very difficult to navigate. In my personal opinion, I am looking away from Lamar Miller, Marshawn Lynch, Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Stewart, Tevin Coleman, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Leonard Fournette, and probably Ty Montgomery. If there's anybody on that list that I will toy around with, though, it will be Ty Montgomery. The matchup is difficult against the Seahawks, but I can see him being a little more heavily involved in that offense. The rest of those scenarios, it's either a bad matchup, or in the case of guys like McCaffrey, Stewart, and Joe Mixon, and as well as Derrick Henry, you're looking at a legitimate time share concern. In DFS, it is very, very important that you are putting guys in your lineup who are going to see the lion's share of the work, or who are going to be able to maximize their potential. And there's just way too many question marks with a lot of those players. I'm fine with taking a wait-and-see approach on those guys. I think that, there could be some increased ownership on Christian McCaffrey, considering the opponent and the preseason, but it's one of those situations where Cam can just easily go out there, throw 3 touchdown passes, and that's the end of the game. I cannot imagine that they're going to try to wear down Christian McCaffrey with carries. I could see that being a Jonathan Stewart thing in week 1 and leave McCaffrey for the games where he needs to be more involved with his athleticism. Tevin Coleman has some appeal because, look, one of the more frustrating things in all of DFS last year was trying to figure out exactly how things would play out in the Falcons' backfield. I don't hate it. He's going to get some catches. Matt Ryan loves to throw to his backs. So I guess at the price, he makes a viable tournament flyer. He's probably a good pivot from Devonta Freeman, but you have to ask yourself this. They just went out and paid Freeman. New coaching system in place there in terms of who's going to be calling the plays. Is there going to be that necessity to go to 2 backs to the point where Coleman will see the amount of work that he needs? Isaiah Crowell, Hugh Jackson wants to run the ball. Crowell had some, good game against the Steelers, albeit it was at the end of the season, so I don't know how much that counts. He's worth a punt at his price. Can't trust him in cash games because, obviously the game flow here should not be in his favor. Marshawn Lynch, we just don't know what we're going to get yet. I'm taking a wait-and-see approach there. Danny Woodhead has some appeal, but it's very low on my list due to the fact that this game should be low scoring, and I just don't want to mess around with that. Eddie Lacy's going to have the revenge game narrative. He's listed as a second teamer right now. I just can't do it. I think that that whole chunk of players are just completely off limits to me. Looking at a few other guys, we'll just kind of breeze through down here. Bilal Powell has some upside this week. I think you can say the same thing about Matt Forte. One of those 2 guys is likely to have a pretty strong game because the receiving options are hit. McCown's going to have to check down a lot. There's no reliable tight end there until Safarian Jenkins comes back. So it's going to be Powell and Forte. Jacquizz Rodgers, who knows what's going to happen. I think this is going to have major implications on lineup construction this weekend. I expected him to be very high owned due to the fact that we know he's going to be the running back for the first 3 weeks of the season. We know that this is a team that wants to run the ball. It's going to be very difficult. There's no pivot, I guess is what I'm saying. You can't pivot to Matt Forte or Bilal Powell and get the same type of baseline expectation. Seattle backfield too congested for Thomas Rawls. Not a big fan of Terrence West, though he should see volume. I think that he's someone that you could potentially use sparingly. He had some decent games at the beginning of the year last year, but overall I'm not really that willing to buy in. Theo Riddick is interesting. He was actually one of the highest scoring running backs on DraftKings last year. His price is a little bit ridiculous. Carlos Hyde is someone that definitely has my attention. This is a starting running back who, now that Matt Breida is backing him up, should see every possible opportunity that there is. in this game. I know it's a tough matchup, but I could see him having a big game, and I'm kind of starting to peel away a little bit from my, Jaquiz ownerships and moving down to Hyde. I think that could be a strategic route to take. Another guy who I think in a season-long format or in other weeks is going to pay huge dividends, could struggle week 1 due to the matchup, is Amir Abdullah. People don't give him enough credit for his pass-catching abilities. They would want to say, well, Theo Riddick is the guy that the Giants are going to use. But I don't know that that's necessarily always going to be the case. We only saw basically one game out of him last year. And even in the second game, and these were weak opponents, Tennessee and Indianapolis, not great teams against the run by any stretch of the imagination. But the realities that we're looking at here is this guy was on pace to have a huge year. Tough matchup here. Price is really, really tempting, though. Like $4,300 for a guy who could see 10-plus carries and 6 or 7 targets. I don't know. That's really tough. In tournaments, I might have to look that route. I think I'm much more apt to going after the Cardinals in the run game than I am the passing game. I'm not saying that either is the smartest play, but it's hard to believe Detroit's just going to put a goose egg up. Wouldn't be shocked to see Amir Abdullah come out there and do some damage. That's about where I'm looking at with my running back situation. Rob Kelly, Frank Gore, only other guys that kind of not necessarily stand out, but they're starting running backs. They could find themselves in a situation where they're capable of producing. I don't think the game flow for Frank Gore works to his advantage in this situation with Scott Tolzien. I think the Rams' defense is actually better as long as Aaron Donald comes back. So it's going to be interesting. Look for my thoughts this week in our premium content being offered for free. Thanks for watching again. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel below. Check us out at researchfantasy.com. Follow us on Twitter at researchandwin, and join us again tomorrow.